Thank you. You may be seated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. We're going to get started with the first witness. State, you may proceed. The witness has been sworn.
The state calls Christian Aguilar to the stand.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Aguilar, could you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the court?
Mi nombre es Cristian Aguilar.
My name is Christian Aguilar.
Mi apellido Aguilar, A-G-U-I-L-A-R.
My last name Aguilar, A-G-U-I-L-A-R.
And where do you currently live, Mr. Aguilar?
Actualmente vive usted, señor Aguilar?
En Alajuela, Costa Rica.
En Alajuela, Costa Rica.
And in August of 2021,
2021.
where were you living?
¿Dónde estaba viviendo usted?
En Sarapiquí, Heredia de Costa Rica.
En Sarapiquí, Costa Rica.
Do you know a Christian,
¿Usted conoce?
do you know a Nicole Aguilar?
¿Usted conoce a Nicolás Aguilar?
Mi hija mayor.
My eldest daughter.
Do you know a Daniel
¿Conoce
Garcia?
a Daniel Garcia?
Sí.
Yes,
And who's Daniel
¿quién
Garcia?
es Daniel Garcia?
Daniel era el novio de Nicole.
Daniel was Nicole's boyfriend.
Do you see
¿Usted ve
Daniel Garcia
Daniel
in
Garcia
court?
en la sala del tribunal el día de hoy?
Correcto.
Correct.
Sí.
Yes.
Can you identify him by an article
¿Usted
of
lo puede
clothing that he's
identificar
wearing?
y díganos qué está vistiendo en este momento?
Él está ahí con una camisa gris, con una corbata negra.
He's there with a gray
veo
shirt
nada
and
más.
a black tie.
The record reflect, Your
Que
Honor,
conste en el
that
acta
the witness
que el
said
testigo
that by the defendant.
identificó
The record reads so as well.
así consta.
At some,
En este momento.
original approach, Judge,
Vamos a acercar, señoría, sí.
with the defendant. May I approach the court reporter? I mean, the court interpreter.
Yes. At some point in August of 2021, did you become aware that Nicole Aguilar and Daniel Garcia were going to your residence in Costa Rica?
Reside en Costa Rica.
Sí.
Yes.
And do you remember when they arrived?
¿Cuándo llegaron?
Fue un viernes.
It was a Friday.
What time of day was it, do you recall?
¿Qué hora del día era? ¿Recuerda?
Era bastante tarde en la noche, como a las 10 de la noche.
It was pretty late at night, around 10 p.m.
And did you ask
Usted le preguntó
Nicole Aguilar or Daniel Garcia about where Dominic was?
de dónde estaba Dominic.
Sí.
Yes.
And what did
¿Qué fue?
Nicole Aguilar say?
¿Qué le dijo Nicolás Aguilar?
Nicole me explicó
Nicole explained to me
que Dominic estaba enfermo,
that Dominic was sick,
que estaba vomitando.
that he was vomiting,
Y ellos estaban listos para ir a buscar una pizza.
and they were ready to go get a pizza.
Entonces Nicole se quedó con los niños
So then Nicole stayed with the children,
y Daniel fue a limpiar a Dominic al cuarto.
and Danielle went to clean up Dominic at the room.
Cuando duraron mucho,
When they took too long,
Nicole tomó a los niños y se fue arriba.
Nicole took the children and went upstairs.
Entonces fue cuando ya ella vio todo lo que estaba pasando.
Obviously.
Overruled.
Whatever. And then that's when she saw everything that was going on.
Y ella me contó que dejaron a los otros niños en un lado y
And she told me that they left the children at one place
en el mismo cuarto, pero se fue a tratar de reanimar a Dominic.
in the same room, but she went to try to reanimate Dominic.
Entonces yo le pregunté
And then I asked her,
que qué dijeron los doctores de que por qué se había muerto, que qué era lo
what
que
did
había pasado.
the doctor say? Why did she die? What had happened?
Entonces ella me dijo que no llamaron a nadie
And then she said they did not call anybody
porque Daniel explicó que si llamaban al 911
because Daniel explained that if they called 911,
ella podrían perder la custodia de los niños. De
they could lose the children's custody, everything.
Entonces ella me explicó
And then she explained to me
de que ellos decidieron hacer algo con Dominic.
that they decided to do something with Dominic.
Entonces ellos se fueron según me dijo,
Obviously.
Sustained.
No contesto.
ella me dijo,
No contesto. No contesto.
If there's an objection,
Con
sir,
revisión, señor.
you stop talking.
Deje de hablar.
ok.
Okay.
That's a question.
Siguiente pregunta.
So
Así
before
que antes
Nicole and Daniel
que Nicole y
arrived
Daniel
in
llegaron
Costa
a
Rica
Costa Rica,
at the place you were living at,
al lugar en que estaba
did
viviendo,
you attempt to
usted intentó
get in contact with
comunicarse
Dominic?
con Dominic.
Antes de que llegaran,
Before they arrived,
How were you trying to do that?
¿cómo estaba tratando de hacer eso?
nosotros me refiero a la mamá de mis hijos, a Shirley.
I refer to my children's mother, Shirley.
Nosotros estábamos en contacto por teléfono
We were communicating by phone.
y Shirley y yo también tratamos de que hiciéramos una videollamada con
And
ellos.
Shirley and I tried to do a video call with them.
Were you able to do a video call with
¿Usted
them?
puede hacer la llamada de video
No,
llamada con ellos?
no se pudo.
No, we were not able to.
Do you remember how many, did Daniel Garcia stay
Garcia se quedó en
at your place
Su
or your
lugar, en
residence
su
in
residencia
Costa
en
Rica?
Costa Rica.
Fueron como 3 días.
It was about 3 days.
May I approach, Judge?
¿Puedo hacer caso aquí?
Yes.
Sí puede.
And permission to publish Bates Exhibit 14 that's been entered into evidence.
14 que es cierto, acabo de poner.
Did you take this photo?
¿Usted tomó esta fotografía?
Me parece.
I think so.
Is that Daniel Garcia?
Ese es
Ese es Daniel Garcia.
That is Daniel Garcia.
And does this location
Ubicación.
seem familiar to you?
Me parece que es la casa donde yo estaba,
I think it was the house. ¿Dónde quién estaba?
donde yo vivía.
I think it's the house where I lived.
And could you explain to
Usted puede
the jury,
explicarle al jurado
did you have conversations
conversaciones
with Daniel
con Daniel
Garcia
Garcia
about him staying
acerca de que
in
se
the
quedara
country of Costa
en el
Rica?
país de Costa Rica?
Mucho, él me estuvo preguntando mucho.
A lot. He was asking me a lot of questions.
What was he asking you?
¿Qué le preguntaba?
Me preguntaba, como por ejemplo, si era rentable tener caballos, vacas.
He
ganado.
asked me if it was profitable to have horses, cows.
También me preguntó respecto a comprar terreno, como tener una farm.
Then he asked me about buying land, like having a farm.
At any point,
En
did
cualquier
you
momento usted
talk to him or ask him about Dominic?
acerca de Dominic a él.
Yo traté de no hablar con él de eso.
I tried to not to speak to him about that.
At any
En
point,
algún
did
momento
you
él
refer to Dominic
se
in any
refirió
way?
a Dominic de alguna manera.
Cuando hablábamos de eso, más que nada,
When we spoke about that,
sí, él se refería a Dominic como el nene.
he used to refer to Dominic as El Nene.
Él nunca dijo el nombre de Dominic, él siempre
He never
mencionaba
said
así.
Dominic's name, he just mentioned it that way.
Yo lo sentía como despectivo, que él decía el nene.
I felt that it was like pejorative that he said El Nene.
And let's fast forward to
Pasemos adelante
the
hasta
last
el último
day that you saw
día
Daniel
que
Garcia
usted,
in
Daniel
Costa
Garcia,
Rica?
en Costa Rica.
Around what time was it at?
¿Cómo qué hora fue eso?
Eso fue, de nuevo, la última vez que vi a Daniel fue de nuevo bastante tarde en la noche.
Again, the last time I saw Daniel, it was pretty late at night.
And was he
Él
talking
estaba
with
hablando
Nicole Aguilar?
con Nicole Aguilar.
Él llegó a la casa
He came to the house
a llevarse su carro y sus
to
pertenencias.
take his car and his belongings.
Y yo tenía a Nicole conmigo
And I had Nicole with me,
y yo no quería que ella hablara con él.
and I didn't want her to speak to him.
Pero él mencionaba que Nicole estaba embarazada de él.
But he would mention that Nicole was pregnant with his child.
Y él decía que era el bebé de ella, que ella le decía a ella, estaban discutiendo que ella tenía que irse con él.
And he would say that it was his baby, and they were arguing, but he was saying that she had to come with him.
Did you prevent her
Usted
from going with him?
impidió que ella se fuera con él.
Sí, de hecho yo
Yes.
tomé a la fuerza a Nicole y la metí
As a matter of
a la casa.
fact, I took Nicole by force and put her in the house.
Entonces él se fue a la puerta a golpearla y
And
a
then he
tratar
went
de
to the
entrar.
door and knocked on the door and trying to get in.
Yo le dije que se fuera,
I told him to go away,
que ya estaba trespassing
that he was already trespassing.
y él me preguntó que qué iba a hacer.
And he asked me what I was to do.
Y entonces yo le dije que él me preguntó que qué iba a hacer, que si iba a llamar a la policía.
Confesión.
Sustain.
Al lugar me contesté.
After you
Después
closed the
de que
door
cerró la puerta
on Daniel Garcia,
con la cara de Daniel García,
did he eventually leave?
que eventualmente él se fue.
Sí,
Yes,
Did he leave with his car?
él se fue con su carro.
él se fue con su carro y con sus cosas.
He left with his car and his belongings.
Él le gritaba a Nicole que se tenía que ir con él.
He was shouting to Nicole that she had to come with him.
I checked that, Judge.
Confesión.
No response.
No responde.
Sustain.
Al lugar.
What did he ask Nicole or yell at Nicole?
¿Qué le dijo a Nicole? ¿Qué le gritó a Nicole?
Que tenía que irse con él.
That she had to go with him.
Ask the witness, Your Honor.
Testigos.
Lord, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Un momento, todavía. Sí.
May he be excused?
¿Se puede hacer este testigo?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sí, se puede
Thank you, sir.
retirar.
You may step down. Call your next witness.
Se puede retirar.
Yes, Your Honor. Please turn off all cell phones.
Will you out?
State calls Agent Mullen to the stand.
Agent Mullen, you remain under the same oath.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Yes, sir. May I approach the exhibits? Agent Mullen, could you explain to the jury what, so looking at, version of published judge?
Yes.
So looking at State's Exhibit 12, which are these AT&T records, and let me get a little clearer.
You have to make it
Well-
darker.
Is that what it is? Can you make it? Well, we can kind of see that. It's a little better. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna take it up. We'll explain that, right? Okay, so on State's Exhibit 12, we see time that is in UTC.
Yes.
What's that?
UTC is Universal Time Coordinated or Coordinated Universal Time. It is a time that's common to every place on the Earth. It starts at longitude 0, which is the prime meridian. And then you do, as your time zones move east and west, you either, as you move west, you take 1 hour off. And as you move to the east, you add an hour until they meet at the 180-degree longitude, which is the international date line.
In examining these records on State's Exhibit 12, at any point was this phone located in the state of Florida?
No, it was not.
And so let's focus on item 32. Permission to approach this?
Yes.
What can you tell me about item number 32?
Sorry. Item 32 is a outbound phone call from 954-683-0208 to phone number 305-505-5049. And that call occurred at 16:04:39 UTC, which would be 11:04:39 Central Daylight Time. And it lasted 6 minutes and 2 seconds.
And where was that call located?
That call would have been, I believe it was in San Antonio. I need to look at my report to verify that.
Was that one of the plotted ones on your report?
It should be, yes. Should be page 9, I believe it was.
Permission to publish, Judge, State's Exhibit 11.
Go ahead.
Okay, so here's your report. And then we go to...
Yeah, there it is. It's at the top of the page,
Up here?
top center. Yes.
Oh, here. This one right here?
No. Top center, the one that says CID 549519.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, that call occurred in San Antonio, Texas.
Correct.
And it was to that number, as you were stating, 305.
305-505-5049.
And would that be consistent with? And you know that phone, or well, you don't know that. Permission to publish states Exhibit 5 for the jury judge.
Okay.
So that means that call would have began around what time? 11:04 a.m.
Correct.
and end at what time?
That would have been, let me do some quick math, that'd be 11/10/41, I believe.
And what date?
July 25th, 2021.
July 5th, 2021. So do you see the timestamp on this video?
I do, yes.
And do you see a person holding a phone?
I do.
Is that consistent with the date and timestamp that you see on item 32 of your records?
Yes, it'd be consistent with an ongoing phone call at that time, yes.
And going back to your report, which was State's Exhibit 11. Well, on or about July 26th of 2021, was the phone ever in the state of Florida?
No, during that time, it would have been, I believe it was traveling in New Mexico and Colorado during that time frame.
And then at some point in July 26th, does it remain in Colorado?
It does until it starts to head south back towards Eagle Pass.
Okay. And then, so talking about July 28th of 2021, are you able to tell based on those records how many calls were made to the number 305-505-5049?
Yes, there were 11 records with that phone number in it, I believe three of which had zero duration or zero elapsed time. So there were a total of 8 calls that had elapsed time during that period.
And previously in this trial, you testified when you get to the border, there's some difficulty about placing the phone in the United States or in Mexico because it might be pinging off of different towers. Is that correct?
It could utilize towers, in that area. It could be just across in Mexico and utilize towers in the U.S., yes, and vice versa.
Some point after this date, did the phone leave the country of the United States?
It did. I believe the last call on a tower in the United States, or the last data session, was at 6:31 p.m. on the 28th. And then after that, there were no further U.S.-based towers used.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
No question.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Tamara. Fire the witness.
We get my. Brief moment to confer with me. Version approach, Judge, with At this time, Judge, state rest.
Defense call your first witness.
Judge, may we have a brief hearing?
Jurors, I'm going to give you about a 10, 15-minute break, and then I'll bring you back in to continue the trial. You're being under the same instructions.
All right, the jury. I have a copy of them, so it's okay. I have it.
Thank you. You're supposed to get everything.
Okay.
Thank you. You may be seated. Defense, you may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you Dr. Lisa Watts,
Yes, I am.
W-A-T-T-S?
Yes.
Could you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you do for a living?
Hi, good morning. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I specialize in both clinical and forensic psychology.
So when you say clinical psychology, is that seeing patients one-on-one in your office?
Yes, it is.
And forensic psychology, is that testifying in courts, either civil or criminal?
Yes, it is.
Real roughly, for how long, how long have you been doing that?
Since 2000, November of 2000.
Have you testified for both the state and the defense?
Yes, I have.
Both plaintiffs and defendants?
Yes.
Where did you go to school? What's your background in education?
I have a master's and doctorate in clinical psychology from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology.
Are you a member of any boards?
I am currently a member of New Hope Board in Kerrville, Texas.
Real roughly, how long have you how many times have you testified as an expert?
Over 80 times.
So my request is you look at materials in this case regarding forensic interviewing, child development, and children's cognitive abilities,
Yes, I did.
specifically on Daniela.
Yes.
And so, how often, real roughly, do you conduct clinical interviews?
Several times a week, I'll conduct a clinical interview.
And what are the important considerations you look at when conducting an interview?
So to conduct a clinical interview, it's really important to use open-ended questions so you get the statement of the individual being interviewed as natural and kind of neutral as possible. It's also important for me to be cautious about using any type of leading or suggestive types of questions, again, because I want the most authentic response from the individual. And then to maintain a neutral disposition, because a lot of people will read, want or desire to please a person in authority.
Are there textbooks on this that you've reviewed in your experience?
Yes.
What are a couple of the textbooks as examples?
Yeah. One of them is called Tell Me What Happened, and the other one is Jeopardy in the Courtroom.
By assessing?
Yes.
Is that a recognized expert in this field?
Yes, it is.
You mentioned suggestibility. How is suggestibility a factor?
Well, it's a factor in this case because a child's memory can be influenced by people who they trust. And that can be counselors, or it can be parents, or it can be persons in authority, persons with a badge. And unfortunately, with suggestibility, a child can inadvertently make false accusations against somebody. And then the other reason that that's important is that when repeated interviews occur with an individual, that can also lead to some suggestibility that changes a child's memory over time.
How can interviewers create false accusations?
Well, an interviewer can create false accusations by their tone of voice, by their use of positive reinforcement, like saying good job, that's great, or by repeated questioning. That can also, it can lead the person to believe that they didn't give enough information, they need to fill in details. It can also result in, I've already said, a child kind of being reinforced by especially somebody they trust.
Can repeated interviews affect a child's accuracy of memory or testimony?
Yes, it can.
How so?
Well, over time, especially this between the ages of 3 and, say, I think 10 is the research, the longer a child goes through time, they rely on what's been told to them versus, or what they hear or what they perceive, or their own thoughts and feelings about an individual, and that can actually alter their memory and their recall.
Could you give us some examples of suggestibility of coaching?
Yes. So if a person talks about an individual in a negative light, even if it's within earshot, or if they talk about somebody as good or bad, or that somebody got really hurt, that those kinds of factors can lead a child to believe that now that individual, even if they believe they were a good person in the past, now might believe that they're no longer that way.
What is confirmatory bias?
Confirmatory bias is when an interviewer already has their mind made up about a situation or how things happened or how things went. And so their questions are guided towards finding confirmatory, about their belief system.
In your experience, which interview offers the most accurate information?
Well, there's a couple of things to say about that. One is when the interview is just using the open-ended questions, so it's mostly the child's or the individual, if it's an adult's response. And then the first interview has one, because it's closest to the incident typically, but it has the most reliable information.
So you mentioned coaching. What impact does coaching have on children?
If it's especially done with somebody that they trust, it can alter a person's recall of information and accuracy of that.
Now, I asked you to look at records in this case regarding Daniel Garcia, correct?
Yes.
And what materials in general did you review in order to come to a conclusion today?
So around the issue with Daniela's statements, I was able to review Dominic's medical records, the repeated interviews that were conducted with Daniela's counseling records, Nicole's repeated interviews, jail recording phone calls between Nicole and her mother, Surly, and then a letter that Nicole wrote to Samantha that included drawings, and a letter to Daniela.
So, regarding Daniela and her first interview, to whom did she give her first interview?
Child safe.
Do you remember what date that was, roughly?
I do. I have that if I can put my notes. August 23rd of 2021.
What jumped out at you on August 23rd, 2021, that interview with Danielle? Well, actually, first of all, what is child safe?
Your Honor, reproach objection.
What is your objection?
He's giving to hearsay outside this witness's qualifications.
She's an expert, Your Honor. She's relying on that for her expertise.
Right, she can rely on it, she can't repeat it.
Your Honor.
She can rely on hearsay, I agree. She cannot repeat the hearsay. Objection to hearsay is sustained.
So, please tell us what, on that first interview, that led you to be important with Danielle.
Objection. Outside the court's ruling.
Sustained, so the expert cannot repeat any of the hearsay. But
Okay.
I think he's asking you something else. When I
In
asked-
other words, the questioning you saw during the
Yes.
first interview, was it suggestive? Did it have
Right.
confirmatory bias? What was the questioning like that you saw in the first interview?
So in the first interview, it was conducted by Child Safe, and Child Safe is an organization where the interviewer is trained in using the type of techniques that are open-ended, neutral. They don't typically looking for whether the child has been led to answer questions in a certain way. And so, the interviewer is using mostly open-ended questions.
And so, in that first interview, did you think that the questioning by the child safe interviewer was suggestive at all?
No.
Without saying what she said, what was Danielle's general concerns or thoughts about her dad?
Objection. Calls for hearsay.
Without saying what was said.
That is overruled.
Okay. There were no negative comments made at that time. There were positive, she described him in a way that would not be indicative of abuse.
For instance, during that first interview, how long did it last, real roughly?
45 minutes.
And was that a normal, typical type child safe interview that you've encountered before in terms of length?
Yes.
And again, suggestibility, you didn't see any at all in that?
No.
Now, you recall that Daniela testified in this case, right?
Yes.
And gave a deposition in this case, correct?
Yes.
And so, for instance, we recall in the deposition that Daniela confirmed that she had lied when asked about whether Daniel had kneed Dominic or had thrown him to the ground. Do you recall that part?
Yes, I do.
And you recall Daniela saying that she lied about those things, right?
Yes.
And so, in looking at suggestibility, confirmatory bias, what were your thoughts when you saw that Daniela admitted lying about things that Daniel had done?
Those kinds of statements at least raise questions about the accuracy of her statements.
In what way?
Well, a report of lying would indicate that something happened that she felt compelled to make those statements.
So as an example, please tell the jury about when Nicole wrote the letter to Daniela.
Okay. So one of the documents that I reviewed was around the same time frame or prior to the May 17th deposition. Nicole wrote a letter that had a drawing, a really very good drawing that said something like fearless. And it was also a very sweet letter that was sent directly from Nicole, directly to Daniela. And it's that kind of statement, like I think it was less than a month later after she received that letter that Daniela had another interview. And in that interview...
I'm going to object to assume facts not in evidence, Judge, that she received that letter.
Okay.
She's able to testify as an expert, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
So there was a letter that had a picture of it, of a cartoon character, and the statements that Nicole made were, I miss you so much, very, again, kind of kind and sweet and good. And it's that kind of content that can also be a form of suggestibility, suggesting that she is a good person. Shortly after that is when there was another follow-up interview with Daniela, and that's when she made the first comment about, I don't know why Nicole is in jail. She didn't do anything.
And that, how does that tie in suggestibility and confirmatory bias when Nicole wrote that letter to Daniela and that picture of Daniela, and then resulting in Daniela's statement? How does that result in suggestibility?
Yeah. Well, the direct suggestion is that she is good. And
She being Nicole?
She being Nicole, yes.
And that resulted in Daniela then telling the prosecution what?
Daniela then told prosecution that I don't know why Nicole's in jail. She didn't do anything.
What other instances of suggestibility did you see with Daniela in this case?
I saw, well, I'll just give another example that comes to mind, is also in the deposition, the May 17th deposition, you were asking her if why she lied. And if she was, I think she said she was afraid. And then during that deposition, I'd have to look and see, but I believe it was Mr. Salinas, asked or interjected and said she was scared. But from my review of the deposition, she didn't say she was scared. So that is an example of the kind of suggestibility that can alter a child's her testimony, her description of events. So if she's been a person in authority says you're scared and that's what you're supposed to say, then that would alter your testimony.
So, for instance, in the August 2021 interview with Child Safe, Daniela said she felt safe with her mom, dad, and cousin. How does that
Objection.
factor
Oh,
into
Mr. Garcia, Your Honor.
suggestibility?
Y'all need to stop talking over each other, please.
Need Bill to finish the question.
But as soon as you went out of bounds, I was able to object.
Rule.
Yes.
Will you ask me again?
So, for instance, in the interview Danielle had with Child Safe, August 2021, when she said she felt safe with her mom, dad, and cousin, how does that factor in your suggestibility analysis?
It was an open-ended question asked of her, and that's the answer she gave without it being directed in any way.
And the fact that she said she wasn't scared of her dad in that interview, did that change at all then during her other interviews and follow-up interviews?
Yes, it did.
And what did you see that indicated suggestiveness on her changing that outlook?
As I mentioned, I did review her counseling records, and within the context of the counseling records, I did note that the therapist would, and she documented that she provided narratives to the child or gave her examples of how one would feel when a given scenario happened. And so looking at the counseling records, it looks like there was some evidence of both suggestibility and coaching going on, even if it was not intentional.
The other example is when she wanted to know if her dad was okay. Did you see that statement change over time with different interviews?
Yes, I did.
What did you see with suggestibility in mind?
So early on, Daniela wanted to know if her dad was okay. She wanted to be able to call her grandmother. She showed concern for him. She missed him. And then as the years and interviews went on, at one point, Daniela said that she no longer wanted to see her dad. And that her portrayal of him was that he was bad.
And then, for instance, her wanting to see her dad again, how did that change over time with the interviews that made you conclude that the suggestibility and confirmatory bias that occurred?
There is interview there's interview that suggests that she is making statements that she no longer wants to see her dad.
So at my request, did you look at her school records?
Yes.
Did you see any behavioral concern or reports at school?
No, I did not.
And what time period was that you looked at?
Double check on that. It's multiple years.
I'm sorry.
It's over the course of multiple years that were provided.
2021, 2024?
Yes, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, yes.
See any behavioral concerns during that time?
There were no incident reports or behavioral concerns.
And as an expert, what does that tell you that's important in this case?
That the child is doing well.
The Daniela's testimony in this case, okay, I'd like to direct you to that. So, for instance, when she said she didn't remember when she last saw Dominic, that part of her testimony, what does that tell you about suggestibility and confirmatory bias in this case? As compared to her initial statements and then her statements in between, the change over time.
Her initial statements, she was able to describe activity that she was involved in with him and the last time she saw him.
And was it important to you that she didn't even remember going home with her mother from the hotel?
Yes,
Why was that important to you?
because she also remembers several other areas of, she does have a recall, and to say she doesn't remember, it again puts into question where some of the information is accurate and what information is inaccurate. And it's hard to tell what information is true and what information is inaccurate.
So as an example, the jury heard her testify, Daniela testify the other day, that she was running up and down the stairs with Dominic, playing tag, swimming at the water park with Dominic while at this hotel, eating pizza with Dominic. Did that stand out as important to you in this case?
It did.
And why is that?
She gave that information just very, very freely. She was able to give detail about that information, and it is consistent with a formed memory.
She also testified that she lied to Mata on the video. What did that lead you to believe as far as suggestibility and confirmatory bias in this case?
It raises the question about what's accurate and what's inaccurate.
How so?
When she makes a statement about lying, we don't know what is true and what is not true.
A little bit about Nicole and confirmatory bias. All right. Did you review? Well, for instance, on the medical records for Dominic with canceled sick visits, what did that indicate?
Objection, relevance.
Well, I'll tie it in, Judge, with your question. So, is it important on confirmatory bias and suggestibility to see how the mother and child interacted over time?
Yes,
And why is that?
because the opposite of confirmatory bias is to consider other alternatives.
And so, by that, you mean something else could have happened, right?
Yes.
And so, with the sick visits that you saw in the medical records, what did that indicate to you?
Objection, relevance.
It's overruled.
You may approach.
On relevance? I already
On-
ruled. It's overruled. No.
What did that indicate?
It's outside your expert qualification, shows objection.
That is overruled.
Behaviorally, when a parent misses multiple appointments, actually many appointments, it would be an indication of a parent's, at minimum, neglect of a child.
And so that ties in in 2018, when Dominic ended up outside the home somehow, right?
Yes.
And what did you see about that? How she
In 2000,
Objection, relevance, Judge. Talking about incidents in 2018.
Response?
She said she looks at that, Your Honor, forming her expert.
She's already stated that. That's a stain.
For instance, when Dominic smoked marijuana.
Objection, relevance.
Judge, she testified that she looks at these things on the past with the interaction between the mother and the child to determine if confirmatory bias exists in the case or not.
It's a stain.
How about the physical condition of Dominic in 2019 with the that you saw in the medical record?
Objection, relevance, and then we approach.
Overruled on relevance.
Objection, outside this expert's qualifications. About what happened in 2019 in regards to suggestibility, referring to Daniela. We're talking about Dominic medical records. And it's outside the court's ruling.
It's not, Judge. You said she could testify about her expert opinion in this area, dealing with...
The question was the physical condition of Dominic in 2019. What is the relevance?
Well, so in order for Dr. Watts to give a good opinion to the jury about Nicole and her interactions with Dominic, we have to be able to show that whether or not confirmatory bias bias exists in the case or if there's another explanation. And so Dr. Watts looks at these in her expert opinion in testifying about confirmatory bias. So she said an expert looks at this in order to form an opinion. It's done by experts in this area. And so she relied upon this in forming her opinion in the case.
Yeah, my ruling stands on relevance, it's overruled.
I'm sorry.
My ruling that it overruled relevance stands. I'm not changing that.
So with regard to outside her expert qualifications, are you
No,
sustaining that?
That's no. My original ruling overruling you is standing.
So you go ahead and answer.
Go ahead and answer.
So, taking a look at the past medical records, really kind of looks at what other opinion or what other kind of possibility could have happened. And the sick visits or the cancellations, and then the last one you asked me was, what was the other?
The physical condition of Dominic as far as in 2019 medical records on the open source one.
Yeah, and so that's the other, there's a pattern of behavior going on that could describe or could explain another option, that another opinion could be, or another possibility to explore could be that that Dominic was not well cared for.
For instance, Dominic was potty trained and then regressed, right?
Correct.
In 2019. What does that indicate to you as an expert in giving the jury an opinion on confirmatory bias or not being present?
When a child has a regressed behavior in toilet training, it often means, especially in light of everything else with the questions about the parental responsibility, it could indicate that there's evidence of abuse.
And, how does that tie in then with the mental health clinician seeing Dominic in 2019?
The expressive and receptive language disorder, yes, that's another factor for a child who has been in some kind of trauma situation, is both language deficits or deterioration in language development, and combine that with the incaprices or regression in toilet training.
For instance, Dominic on language development, expressive language, that was in the second percentile, right, in 2020?
Yes.
And what does that tell you when you're testifying, ladies and gentlemen, of the jury about confirmatory bias?
That there was another alternative.
In what way in other words, what's the second percentile?
Second percentile means that 98% of the children his age had better language development than Dominic.
The language disorder, what else did you see about that, if anything?
It was categorized as severe. Also, there was recommendation that Dominic receive speech therapy twice a week.
And then there was testimony from Nicole in this case that at the hotel she became so angry with Dominic that she hit him so many times and so hard with her hand that her hand hurt because she could, quote, feel the anger, unquote. What does that tell you in this case about suggested confirmatory bias?
It's an example of the alternate, there's another explanation for what happened.
Are there any other indicators that you saw in this case that helped you form an opinion as to vulnerability to suggestibility by you?
I can't think of any.
Okay. And so did you come to an opinion as to Daniela's vulnerability to suggestibility?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
She, because of all the factors discussed, that I do believe that she is a victim of suggestibility.
How about coaching?
Yes.
What was your opinion?
That the statements being made to her or around her altered her, Daniela's statements over time.
Now, some people might ask, well, maybe she started remembering things that she didn't remember before. People hear about delayed outcry, for instance, right?
Yes.
And so, were you impressed one way or the other with whether or not this was just a delayed outcry, or if this was suggestibility in the coaching?
Yes, my opinion is that it is a form of, or she's, her statements changed because of suggestibility, just given all of the other information we discussed and I reviewed.
I passed it.
Thank you. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Sir?
So regarding that letter that you discussed, you don't even know if Danielle ever received that letter.
No, I do not.
You never spoke with Daniela?
No,
Did you ever interview Daniela?
no.
Okay. So we discussed, where you discussed about types of questions that are asked. Can you tell me what's a free-form question?
An open-ended question.
Okay.
It's just a question that is, tell me what happened is probably the most important open-ended question. So it doesn't have any directive statements with it.
And regarding children and their parents, or those that are typically complicated relationships, would you agree with that?
They can be, yes.
They can be, right? Because at one point, a child can be scared of their parent, and they could also still love their parent.
Yes,
We see it plenty of times in our relationships with maybe our own family members. We like them, but we also love them, right? Or we
Yes.
dislike them, we hate them, all those kind of emotions kind of happen, right?
yes,
So with regard to your training, and your background is in the clinical psychology, is that right?
yes,
You're not a medical doctor?
No.
You're not a pediatrician?
no,
You're not an ER doctor?
no,
You're not an anthropologist?
no.
So with regard to this evidence in this case, did you go over the surveillance video that was presented?
I did review it.
You did review the surveillance video, okay. And so did you also review the photos of the recovery scene?
Yes,
Did you also review the photos of the anthropological exam,
yes,
where there were fractures to the jaw in the front and in the back?
yes,
You also know that multiple ribs were broken.
yes, I do.
You also know that there were a broken bone in the hip region.
Yes,
Okay. And so, with regard to Daniela's testimony, which I actually have here from the court reporter, did you review all that? The
no,
testimony that she gave the other day?
no,
No. Okay. And so in that, there's questions regarding whether she's scared.
okay.
And so explain to the jury the difference between being scared and being afraid. Because you kind of you pointed that semantic out, and I'm kind of curious about what your distinction is with that, between those two words.
I mean, it is just semantics. I wouldn't
Oh, okay.
differentiate.
So there isn't really a distinction. So if my child was to come up to me and say, Dad, I'm afraid of X, you could say the same thing, that they are scared of X, right?
Yes,
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that part.
Mhm.
Okay, so are you familiar with a study regarding the psychotherapy focus on how children between the ages of 3 and 6 recall traumatic events? And essentially the study was looking at Hurricane Katrina victims, children in particular, and how their recall of events differed from those children that suffered long-term traumatic, post-traumatic stress, or long-term traumatic events.
no, I'm not familiar with that
And
one.
so in that study, there is a difference between children that experience a single short-term traumatic event versus long-term trauma. And what happens is the days sort of start to mesh together. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes,
Okay. And it's because essentially my Monday, if I'm a child that goes through some traumatic event, is the same as Tuesday. And my Wednesday is the same as Tuesday. My Thursday is the same as Wednesday. And then Friday, and they kind of all mesh together versus a single event, right?
yes,
And so with regards to her testimony and her statements, there are consistencies throughout all those statements. Is that correct?
there are
And
consistencies.
those consistencies are, they were at a hotel,
Yes,
that at some point dominant and Daniel went up to the hotel room.
Yes.
And that the children, and when we say children, we're referring to Daniela, Alexander, Avani, and also Nicole remained outside. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that's consistent throughout, and we can also see, may I personal witness?
Yes.
Since you haven't reviewed this, but. And so what's also been in testimony is that they stayed across multiple hotels, right? Are
Yes.
you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. And so the child's memories, we're talking about traumatic, being a witness to traumatic events over the course of time, that could blend into a single episode or a single event location, right? Again, we're asking a four and a half year old
Right.
to process what's going on. And explain to me, do you understand kind of the legal duty that parents have to protect and care for their own children?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think a 4.5-year-old child understands that concept?
No.
That might be difficult for them to understand, right?
Correct.
Okay. So let's talk about, and this was the direct examination of Daniela back in May 22nd, 2024. And I will refer you to So what do you remember about the last time you saw Dominic? She says, I don't remember because it was a long time ago, which is accurate, right? 3 years ago.
Okay.
But the last time I saw him, my dad told me, Avani, and Dominic, Avani, my brother, and Nicole, to go out in the car, and Dominic had to stay with him in the hotel room. And so Dominic and your dad were in the hotel room. Ask her what happened next. We went into the hotel room and saw Dominic. And again, when you went into the hotel room and saw Dominic, what did you see? Now that question, is that a free-form question or is that a suggesting question?
That is an open-ended question.
Okay, it's an open-ended question. He was on the floor in the bathroom with his shirt off and his eyes were closed. Okay, so let's look at permission to publish Judge State's Exhibit 5. And so let's go to State's Exhibit 5. You've not interviewed Daniela, but you know what she looks like based on interviews that you've seen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, playing it at 12:11 a.m. This is State's Exhibit 5. Do you see Daniela?
Yes.
Whose hand is she holding?
Nicole.
Okay. So a child may hold the hand of someone that they feel safe with?
Yes.
You tell me right now when you see Daniela back in the screen. You see Daniela?
Yes.
Okay. Does it look like she's looking at something?
I mean, she's watching the scenario.
Okay, she's watching what's happening, right? Okay. So let's fast forward it a little bit. to about 12:16. So you see the defendant come back up with that child that Daniela was looking at back upstairs? That consistent with everyone else remaining outside while this person's going upstairs?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go 12:32 in the morning. You see Daniela at 12:32, 12:33,
Yes.
and she's walking up the stairs? So that's also consistent with what she's saying about going back to the hotel room.
Yes.
Then let's go to actually that same day. About 9:13 in the morning. And I wanted to point you to, again, in her testimony, this is when she sees Dominic in the hotel room, not moving, lying down on the bathroom floor,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Okay. There was a question about if she felt safe with Nicole. Do you know the answer to that?
No.
Here it is from the other day, May 22nd. Do you feel safe with Nicole? And what was her answer?
Yes.
Did Nicole ever hit Dominic? What was her answer?
No.
Right. And so, would a child perceive, let's say, disciplinary, like spanking, as hitting as opposed to maybe other forms of physical abuse as hitting? Does that make sense?
If I understand you correctly, yes. I mean, a child can perceive hitting as,
Different than a
Hit.
spank on the bottom, right?
I don't know that a child would describe that differently.
Okay. And so, the question was asked, are you afraid of your dad? Her dad being the defendant. And what was her response?
Yes.
Yes. And let's see, there was also questions about whether she remembered if her dad hit Dominic. And her responses were,
And this, yeah, I didn't hear
that's
this.
right, you weren't for this. And I want to talk about Dominic and your dad. Did you ever see your dad hit Dominic?
She says yes.
Yes. And so that form of that question is the same as, because if we can read it, did you ever see your dad hit Dominic, is the same as the question that is later asked of her. Did Nicole ever hit Dominic? Right?
Yes.
Those are the same forms of questions.
Yes.
And so let's look at this part in State's Exhibit 5. Now play it. Do you see Daniela?
Yes.
Who's she standing next to?
Nicole?
What's she doing now? What's Daniela doing?
Yeah. Sitting.
Next to who?
Nicole.
That's consistent with someone who's not afraid of that person that she's sitting next to, right?
Correct.
acquiescence. You heard that term in clinical psychology?
Yes.
And so acquiescence is, may I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Is the idea that a child would acquiesce to what someone in authority, or depending on the form of a question, typically an adult who's asking them questions, may give them information that they perceive that the adult wants them to hear. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so that's the reason why it's important to have open-ended or free-form questions as opposed to leading questions that suggest answers, right?
Yes.
And could you explain, or, oh, I just had it right now. My contract. Just 1 moment, Judge. Oh, there it is. May I approach the witness, Judge?
Yes.
Have you ever seen this document? And I'm going to mark it as State's Exhibit 82. Have you ever seen that?
Yes.
You have seen it. And so that document, and I'm marking it for the record, Your Honor, as State's Exhibit 82. Thank you. So you have seen this document?
Yes.
Okay. And so, assurances. What's that?
You're reassuring a person of that they're going to be okay.
So in clinical psychology, are assurances important when dealing with witnesses who have experienced trauma?
Yes.
And so the reason is because we need to make sure or assure that they are safe, that they're going to be okay, that telling the truth and the whole truth does not negatively affect them, right?
Yes.
Because again, we're talking about a child who is a witness to trauma, and then expecting that child to go to the first adult and explain everything that happened without really having a rapport with that child,
Okay. Yes.
right? And rapport is important.
Yes.
And so, State's Exhibit 82, which you looked at, and you said that you've reviewed, was actually a contract or a promise or an assurance from myself to the child, Daniela, right?
Yes.
And in that, I don't suggest what happened or even who did what.
Right.
It's merely, she won't get in trouble as long as she tells the whole truth about what happened to Dominic Aguilar.
Yes.
Right? I don't say, tell me exactly what your dad did. I don't say, tell me exactly what Nicole did. Or, hey, I need you to say this exactly happened. Instead, it's, you will not get in trouble as long as you tell the truth. Is
Yes.
that an assurance?
That is.
And there's also children, as they get older, understand the importance of telling the truth.
Yes.
And they understand the oath. And the oath that you took yourself today, right?
Yes.
Which is to tell the whole truth, to tell the truth in front of this jury.
Yes.
So we talked about Nicole Aguilar is a neglectful mother.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And you reviewed the CPS records that she had in Florida.
Yes, I did.
And with regards to that, let's talk about those instances that seem to indicate neglectful behavior.
Yes.
And so one of those things was Dominic had sores on his body that were not properly cleaned.
Yes.
Is that an example of neglectful behavior?
Yes, potentially.
Okay. Dominic getting to a vape pen and smoking it, that's a form of neglectful behavior?
Yes.
Dominic getting out of the house and wandering around in the street, that's a form of neglectful behavior.
Yes.
And in none of those records in Florida, in those CPS records, was there any record of her being physically abusive to Dominic?
No.
The records were limited to her being a neglectful mother.
That's my that's my understanding. Yes.
And so you testified that you testified in multiple, I guess, jurisdictions?
Yes.
Have you testified in other states before?
No.
Okay. So just around Texas?
Yes.
Different counties?
Yes.
How many times have you testified in San Antonio?
Maybe 6.
Okay. Fair County. So, could you explain to me your kind of your practice? Is it you see patients and then you come and testify on the side, or are you a state, or do you work for the government, or where do you work?
I'm in private practice,
Okay.
and I probably about 30% of my practice is seeing patients for therapy. Probably another 30 to 40% is doing evaluations where I get referrals from pediatricians or family practice doctors or psychiatrists that ask for assistance with diagnostics and to better understand the sort of case formulation for an individual. And then I do consulting. I'm the consulting psychologist for Hill Country Youth Ranch. I've done consulting for Arms of Hope. And then I do forensic work the rest of my practice.
What percent of the practice is testifying in court?
Testifying in court or in general forensic?
Testifying in court.
Testifying in court is probably 10%.
Okay, so 10%. And then is there a fee associated with, let's say, just testifying in court?
Yes,
What's that fee?
$225 an hour.
Okay. Also, if I keep asking questions, that's going to keep going.
Okay.
And what about, I guess, in the initial consultation? Is there a fee associated with that too,
For forensic or in general?
in this case?
It's my hourly rate.
Okay, so the hourly rate applies to just working on the case, reviewing material?
Yes, it does.
And preparing for ultimately this part right now of testimony?
Yes.
Okay. How much have you been paid, or is total?
I've not been paid.
You've not been paid, okay.
No.
Will you submit an invoice after?
Yes.
Okay. How much will that be?
I think I've spent at least 20 hours on the case.
Okay. So there was a lot of discussion about the child, Daniela, wanting to see her father. Is that right?
Yes.
And as we talked about earlier, that is also consistent with children's complicated relationships with parents.
It can be, yes.
I guess going to the expressive language disorder of Dominic, that you reviewed in the Florida medical records,
Yes,
that has nothing to do with his broken jaw, does it?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know. Does the expressive language disorder have anything to do with his broken ribs on his body?
No, I don't know that either.
Okay. That expressive language disorder, does that have anything to do with his broken pelvis that he had?
Again, I don't know.
You've never reviewed any phone calls or interactions, text messages between Samantha Bettis and Nicole Aguilar?
No,
But you did review phone calls between Nicole Aguilar and Shirley Acevedo, who's Nicole's mother.
yes, I did.
Past witness.
To be fair, you were appointed by Judge Inez as the defense expert in this case, right?
Yes,
And, you know, witnesses don't have to talk to the defense, do they?
no,
We asked to talk to Danielle, and we were denied that request, right?
yes,
So we wanted to talk to her, but we weren't allowed to.
correct.
You recall towards the end of Daniela's testimony the other day, I know the prosecutor was showing it to you, when Bridget Garza asked her if she remembered Daniel Garcia hitting Dominic, she said, "I don't remember," correct?
Correct.
And does that tie in with your concerns about vulnerable suggestibility and victim being coached?
It does.
And does that tie in then to unreliable memory as a result?
Yes.
How so?
Well, the ability to say I don't, when she says I don't know, instead of, she's one time saying she does recall the information, and then another time she says she doesn't.
As an example, the prosecutor showed you the contract he did with Daniela, correct?
Yes,
And right after Daniela signed that contract, she looks at the video and said, "I lied in that video about Daniel Garcia, my dad, kneeing Dominic and throwing him to the ground and hurting him," right?
yes,
And so after cross-examination by the state, is it still your opinion that Daniela is vulnerable to suggestibility and a victim of being coached?
it is still my opinion.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Never seen. So let's look at the difference between Ms. Garza's question and my question, right,
Okay.
regarding that. So going back to the testimony of May 22nd, 2024, the question was, when Mr. Gross asked if you remember that, if your dad hit Dominic and you said you don't remember, do you remember that? You said you didn't remember. Is that more suggestive, that is more leading, than the other question that I've asked her in this same testimony,
That'll be an example of a direct question.
right? Which would be a direct question, which is suggesting to the child a particular response or an answer.
Potentially.
That's it.
No questions, Your Honor.
They should be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Dr. Watts, yours.
Thank you.
Next witness.
That's right, Your Honor.
Both sides rest and close.
Rest it close.
Closure.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what that means is that all of the evidence that you will be considering in your deliberations is now before you. All the evidence is now closed. So let me tell you a little bit about tomorrow. We are going to start first thing in the morning. I would like to start right at 9. I will read the charge to you that will apply in this case. That is a written order. You will take it back with you. But I have to read it to you. After I read it to you, both sides, both attorneys are going to give you their closing arguments. Once you have the jury charge and the closing arguments, you'll have all the evidence before you. You will start deliberating. It's very important that you explain to your family when you get home today that when you're deliberating, you don't have your mobile devices. So if there's an emergency, you need to give them the number on the back of your card, your juror badge, so that they call. We are here. As long as you are here deliberating, we are here with you. We are answering the phones. So during the time that you're deliberating, if anybody needs to take a break, we take a break together. So like nobody goes to the bathroom by themselves and you let others deliberate. My alternates, you will be separated. You'll be in a different room waiting. So that's going to be tomorrow. There is no time limit to your deliberations. We will be here until we have a verdict from you. If you have any questions, please ask my bailiffs. They're also going to give you a lunch menu because this is a working lunch. So as soon as they finish their closing arguments, you go to deliberations and we'll provide lunch for you for tomorrow. So fill out your lunch item before you leave and then you are excused. You remain under the same instructions. Thank you.
All rise for the jury.